Those lunatics at Paradox have finally done it. They've introduced Unlanded gameplay into Crusader Kings III, marking the most revolutionary change of the game to date. Roads to Power isn't just an expansion. This is hewing the game in two and splitting it right down the middle. No longer are you tied to your castle, organizing your realm and bickering with your neighbors. Now you can live the life of a storied vagabond or warlord, roaming the world and causing mayhem and mischief in your wake. You can, of course, settle down on a nice patch of land somewhere and pivot to playing the game traditionally, or you can keep skulking the earth for generations, or even invade and seize an already established empire. There's countless ways to approach it. But that's not all. The devs have gone back to the drawing board and completely reworked the Byzantium experience. Believe it or not, there's now even more infighting, trickery and subterfuge. The region now has its own ruling type, an administrative government. At the top, the head honcho, the Emperor, but beneath them are several powerful families, each with land entrusted to them. The twist is, nothing is guaranteed by blood. You might start with a region, but the Emperor could quite easily wrestle that off you and pass it on to another in your family, or another bloodline entirely. The imperial dynasty is not set in stone either, and any of the houses can influence, scheme, or murder their way to the top. This all goes hand in hand with a slurry of new changes in a free update, the most notable being a reworked and fleshed out intrigue system. Now, that's crucial, because as a Byzantine governor gunning for a status boost, well, there's going to be lots of plots and ploys going on. Crusader Kings III will never be the same again. And today I want to have a dig into the new expansion, as well as explore some of the new role-playing options with a little tale from history called Alan and the Dandies. Let's unpack Roads to Power. There's a lot to unpack in this expansion, and I'm going to start by looking at the Byzantium changes. Now, this is obviously a popular region, but I always felt it underwhelming to play. It was just another empire, albeit with an excessive amount of rioting. But now we've got something far more interesting. The Emperor is at the top, the influential powerful families beneath them, and then the rest of the households at the bottom. The further you climb up the ladder, the more sway you'll have in the empire. None of this is defined by blood. A region or theme isn't tied to a family in perpetuity. The Emperor can remove them from governance and give it to someone more competent. If your lands get taken and passed to your rival, that's just life. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Each family has a base of operations, their estate. This is another new mechanic, basically a customizable and upgradable hub which can be moved at will. If you want to be nice and close to the Emperor and in the fray of political intrigue, you can plonk your estate down a stone's throw from Constantinople. You can pick which buildings get raised in your estate and fine-tune their upgrades. You'll have to choose what kind of estate will seat your family. A defensive fortress, a bustling trading hub, or a lavish pleasure palace are all feasible options. There's a few new metrics exclusive to the region. Influence, which is used to rise up among the ranks and as a currency for operations, and governance, how effectively you're running your theme. So, many powerful families, money getting funneled into pockets, movers and shakers trying to twist the crown around their fingers. It's all very Games of Thronesy. And that's kind of how it plays out. Every prominent family will be making moves, unfurling schemes to elevate themselves. You either react to them, or you get ahead. Besmirch their name at gatherings, twist the Emperor's ear. The game's new intrigue system comes into play in full force here, and you'll constantly be enacting or reacting to one scheme or another. To note, I'm really enjoying the new intrigue system. There are plenty of new scheme types, and each requires a different set of agents doing different things. It feels like a more comprehensive system, rather than the old mechanic of bang, marry, or kill. So you're either spinning or getting caught in a web of lies and whispers. Little schemes can return little gains here and there, but big ones, they can give you everything. Any family has a shot at the imperial crown. There's a line of succession that's based on prominence in the empire and past deeds, and this can be manipulated. Besmirch the names of others, have rivals sing your praises, just go ahead and murder every other candidate. There's a lot of roads to power. Whichever one you take is up to you. Within a lifetime, you can go from a governor who loses his lands in disgrace to a scheming, plotting, murdering tour de force who manages to manipulate his way onto the imperial throne. As I said, very Game of Thronesy. But that's Byzantium for you. To be frank, I don't really play this region as I viewed it as another empire with a bit of flavour. But with the expansion in action, this immediately feels like one of the most distinct areas. Really fleshed out, interesting, and you're approaching the game entirely differently. You're not paying attention to the outside world because there's so much conflict happening close to home. The other flagship change is a big one: unlanded gameplay. Now, the implications of this are massive. Crusader Kings has always been about rulers. Whether you're a small fry or a superpower, you run a region, manage a court, get into trouble, and go to war. You're only really concerned with the area around you, unless you have particularly lofty ambitions. Being unlanded turns this on its head. You can travel anywhere, meddle in affairs all over the globe. You can settle a kingdom wherever you like, perform jobs from Italy to India, and go wherever the winds of adventure take you. CK has always been this interesting middle ground between grand strategy and role-playing, but this splits it down the middle and gives an incredible avenue for the RP side. And I'm thrilled about this, because I don't think there's another game out there that captures what Crusader Kings does. You can pick key historical figures, such as El Cid, and gallivant around your region working for kings, building an army, and changing history. In some cases, you're nudging the world stage in a different direction. In others, you're shattering order and turning everything on its head. With Suleiman, you can traipse around Europe amassing an army before returning to take the entire Persian Empire by force. It's worth noting that you don't have any levies. Your entire fighting force are men-at-arms, which results in some ludicrous battles and some very satisfying slaughters. Your base of operations is your camp, which, like the estate, can be upgraded and specialized. You'll undertake tasks and jobs in your region, curry favor with local lords, and make requests of those you've aided, always building your entourage of followers and knights. When you've done all you can do in a region, you pack up and move on. Your adventurer band has a specialty, whether you're a sword for hire, a simple explorer, or a gaggle of bandits. Each gives a distinct feel and dictates the kind of work you'll find. Some contracts are a simple matter of fulfilling a job for a character, often played out using the new operations interface. In some regions, you can pledge yourself to a faction, potentially upsetting the balance and fracturing kingdoms. There is so much opportunity here for those who are drawn to the role-playing side of the game. You don't have to take on a historical figure. You can make your own anywhere in the world. Do whatever you want. Set whichever goals tickle your fancy. And let me tell you, this can lead you to some truly absurd places. How crazy are we talking? I'm glad you asked, and rather than try to express it, I figure I'd instead share the story of one such band of unlanded characters, and the misadventures they had traveling Europe. These are the fearless Dandies, and this is their boss, Alan. Gathered in their camp beneath their flag of a swan, the only animal that perfectly represents their tenacity and gusto, the fearless Dandies made a life for themselves in the Scottish countryside. They had a travelling barber in their camp, keeping themselves and the local populace up with the current trends of the medieval world. They performed odd jobs around the region, sorting out minor land disputes, training recruits, abducting and ransoming nobles, that sort of thing. Though their entrepreneurial lifestyle was quickly shattered when their boss, Alan, went a little too far trying to form connections with a noble house. Caught with their trousers down, the gang was promptly chased out of Scotland, taking flight to the south. Alan peddled his trade there while gaining connections, gold, and a secret illegitimate son with the Duchess of South Wales. Unfortunately, the grubby English masses had allowed a plague to break out, so the Dandies hopped the channel to Brittany. After a lovelorn Alan gets rejected by the local Duchess, he decides he's over French girls and drags the gang down to Castile. The king here was a mere child, and the Queen Mother was tantalizingly single for the recently rejected Alan. The gang sets up roots in the region and performs odd jobs for the king, while Alan took care of his mum. The once noble Dandies had realised that crime doesn't pay is bullshit, and they were getting rich quick performing any and every crime imaginable. After a quick tour of southern Spain, they boarded a boat to Sardinia and received a lucrative contract from a local noble. He hired the Dandies to enact a daring rescue of a beautiful noblewoman. Sadly, the operation was a disaster, going tragically wrong the moment Alan decided to sleep with her. Disgraced and unpaid, the Dandies were chased out of Sardinia and took a well-needed break in Sicily. Alan opted to bring his new noble flame with him, and they got married. It was here in Sicily that she gave birth to his two sons, Alanson and Alanson. This seemed like a lovely place to raise a family, so the gang decided to hold off on all criminal enterprises, instead performing jobs for the landed elite, playing things straight and not getting into trouble. On one such job, Alan was contracted to quell a peasant rabble. After speaking to the peasants, he was outraged that they were being quelled and decided to fight this injustice for them. The peasants rallied behind Alan, proclaiming them as their leader, and thus, Alan and the fearless Dandies accidentally declared war on Sicily. Realizing they were hopelessly outnumbered, Alan opted to employ his specialized skill set and slept with the king's sister. Unfortunately, this had no impact on the war, so Alan instead decided to murder the king. Though the conflict raged on, and Alan was now trapped in a battle of wits against an 8-year-old. Still feeling hard done by, Alan makes one last-ditch effort and sleeps with the dead king's other sister before trying to negotiate with the new queen of Sicily. Obviously, she was having nothing to do with the man who killed her father and defiled 2 of her aunts, so she imprisoned the Scottish dandy. Alone and unable to seduce or murder anyone, Alan dies pathetically in the dungeons, and the leadership of the gang goes to his son, Alanson. The war had decimated the band of adventurers, and as he was unable to recruit more men, children weren't allowed in the barracks after all, the young Alanson decided to flee the site of his father's disgrace and travel around Eastern Europe. After some very questionable actions for a child, Alanson became a man. He was known for his quick wit, honeyed words, and silver tongue. In another life, he would have been a diplomat, but not here. He was a dandy. It was also around this time that he and his brother also got into witchcraft. Not really sure what happened there. He found himself in Poland, and there were plenty of jobs for the replenishing gang. But sadly, Alanson just couldn't keep that silver tongue of his under wraps, and it found its way to the Polish queen. The king finds out, and he is understandably furious. So like their emblematic swan, they take flight. He'd later learn that the king imprisoned his one-night stand, and she'd had Alanson's child in captivity. Though that babe would probably never see any prospects, Alan was happy to add possible father to a possible king of Poland onto his resume. With a fire lit in his loins, Alanson skirted around the Baltics, continuing his crime spree and wanton pursuits. Somewhere along the way, he hears that a duchess he seduced was imprisoned by her husband. Alanson does the honourable thing, paying her bail and securing her release. This new flame thanks him and asks to join her gallant saviour on his quest. Alanson pretends not to hear and sails off to England, leaving her behind. Where his father had caused so much trouble, Alanson found a bountiful life in England, lucrative job opportunities, rich, careless nobles with fat wallets, and, what's this? Another highly esteemed and beautiful queen for him to pursue. So the gang works the countryside while Alanson tries to make a move, and then tragedy strikes. No, not the king finding out. The Black Death. Quite literally, the biggest mood killer in the medieval world. It was spreading across the globe like wildfire, and Alanson and the Dandies said sod it and decided to try and outrun the plague. Not before Alan bonked the Queen of England though, mind you. Realising that plagues can travel across the land, they decided they'd catch a boat and sail north, holing up in Iceland to wait for this whole bloody mess to blow over. It was on that voyage that Alanson heard from the King of England. He didn't appreciate being cuckolded and sought to blackmail the dandy, threatening his reputation. Alanson knew he had no reputation to ruin, so he told the king to F off. And soon enough, both he and the queen succumbed to plague, nipping that whole problem in the bud. Iceland was a peaceful time. There was no work to speak of, so the gang took a brief vacation, drinking, fishing, and most importantly, not catching the plague. That peacefulness was shattered when the Icelandic chief accused Alanson of bedding his daughter, a thing that Alanson definitely did. Caught between a very angry father and the bubonic plague, the Dandies decided to take their chances with the Black Death and sailed back to Scotland, although the disease had killed off most of Europe by this point, including, hopefully, most of the people who were angry at Alanson for defiling their wives/daughters/sisters. So this was a fresh start. Would Alanson decide to finally settle down, spending the rest of his days in the Scottish Highlands? Would he continue his journey, being chased out of country after country when his latest sexual scandal emerged? Or would his reckless lifestyle catch up with him? And would he end his days alone, abandoned, and suffering from every venereal disease he'd managed to contract up until now? Who's to say? So, as you can see, the new Unlanded mechanics take you to some wild places. In the case of Alan and his Dandies, a saga of constantly being on the run from angry husbands with no real goal in mind other than seeing where the winds of adventure take them. If I had to sum up the expansion in a word, I'd call it nuts. Absolutely bonkers. Allowing players to be unlanded and travel around the world doing whatever their heart fancies, it is madness. It completely changes the game, and I don't think I'll ever play CK3 the same again. Yes, the novelty will wear off, but the implication that at any point you can just give up your titles and go on an epic quest around the world, it's definitely something I will find hard to resist when I'm dug in deep and tired of kingdom politics. It takes the game in a new direction, and I think this might be a pivotal moment. On one side, the grand strategy, on the other, a much more role-playing focus. They still intermingle, but if Paradox continues to develop each part of the game separately, they don't have to compromise one to satisfy the other. I had so much fun playing Unlanded, and it's clearly a very drastic and technically complex thing that they've done. This is the first iteration, and there are some problems. As you're traveling so often, getting the same events does grow stale. They've done good work tweaking the lifestyle perks to impact Unlanded characters, but there's still a lot of choices you can make that won't do anything for you. I'd have liked to have seen more integration with the Legends mechanic, because frankly, it seems like Adventurers, Legends, they'd go hand in hand, but the two expansions didn't really bounce off each other. There's also bugs here and weird interactions there, and hopefully those all get squashed as more players get their hands on it and identify issues. As for the Byzantium portion of the expansion, and this is coming from someone who doesn't typically play in that region, I thought the changes were really good. It makes the Empire feel like a distinct individual region. There's so much going on, constant scheming and plotting, and you're so focused on everything that's going on close to home, you're kind of ignoring outside threats, which is pretty true to history. This only really works because of the changes to the intrigue system, and while it's got more moving parts and is more interesting, it does quickly fall back into set a scheme and wait. What I'm most interested in now is seeing what the future of the game looks like. Adding Unlanded gameplay, it feels like they chopped the game in two. Will they start to flesh out this new side and add more possibilities there, or only work on content that affects all styles of gameplay? They've really gone deep into Byzantium, and they've made it feel unique. What comes next? More Empire reworks, a Holy Roman overhaul, other distinct playable governments introduced? Could the Merchant Republic I have been clamoring after be on the cards? This is such a huge change to the game, and it has really shaken things up. Honestly, I am at a loss as to where they go next to follow it up, but I cannot wait to find out. And I know I'm not the only one with these questions. Let me hear your thoughts. Where do you hope the game goes next after these changes? Do you want them to flesh out Unlanded mechanics further, or keep their main focus on the traditional gameplay? Get those opinions written down below. And if you enjoyed the ballad of Alan and the Dandies, let me know. It's a lot of fun making those RP story focused pieces. If you want to see more, drop a comment. We're a new channel, and every like, comment and subscribe goes a long way and is very much appreciated. There's also loads of other content on the channel, so go have a gander and see if any of that takes your fancy, as well as a Patreon link, which is currently free. I feel like we're missing the point of Patreon, but oh well. Go check that out if you want to see loads and loads of other content. And with that shameless promotion out of the way, one final time. This has been Crusader Kings III, an absolutely mad expansion that means one thing: the medieval world will never be the same again.